I am truly really excited about this session tonight because it's an opportunity to sort of peel back the curtain on the whistleblower and what their lives are really like behind the scenes. And I think it's understanding that this is not just a work issue. We talk a lot about work-life balance, and whistleblowing is kind of the disruptor of that organizations who will have these codes of ethics or codes of conduct and these frameworks for healthy employees, they violate those codes of conduct as soon as whistleblowing gets started. And, we've really started to define whistleblowing as something that becomes very adversarial. And so when we think about that and we think about this lack of work-life balance, we think about the people who are sort of hitting cleanup behind the scenes, and that's the family. The workplace doesn't care how long this goes on or what it does to somebody's life. They've got their lawyers and they're kind of done with it. But the whistleblower can spend decades and decades and decades dealing with this, which means their families deal with it and their children grow up knowing no other way. And I've talked to some adult children of whistleblowers who have these thoughts about the world and fairness because of how they grew up. So we know that that retaliation is trauma, and trauma can very much be intergenerational. So when we hear about stories of people who have kind of survived all that, we get really interested in what that means to survive it, and how they made that happen, and what are maybe some of the lessons learned we can take from these families. So I'm going to go ahead and we'll do sort of a round robin. I know Kelly the best, so maybe I'll start with Kelly, and I'll ask you to introduce yourself, a little bit about what you do, and then we'll sort of go around the room, and then once Madeline and Karen have introduced themselves, we'll dive into more of the conversation.
Sure, thank you. This is an honor. I am actually former law enforcement certified fraud examiner. I have a podcast that Jackie has generously been on for 2 times. My husband was a tenured professor at a small liberal arts university. He was called on a Zoom call on a Friday afternoon, and they accused him of Title IX offenses, which he literally was like, sports. Madeline, you'll appreciate this. They said he was anti-Semitic, and he said, I'm a Semite. And they put him on leave, and the university has been going through issues. We have, my husband passed away in 2021. He got cancer pancreatic cancer a couple months after all of this started. For us, we couldn't tell many people that he was sick because the lawyers, and my whole thing is the lawyers. Jackie has heard me talk about the lawyers. I don't know how you guys have gone through it so long. So he passed away. I took the case to trial in May, almost a year ago. We got intentional infliction of emotional distress, a very small award. They didn't find for discrimination or defamation, and they're appealing the small award. But my husband was the only one who stood up. There's a general counsel at the university who picked out older, more expensive employees, and all of them went away, but my husband didn't. And they have spent $3 million fighting me, and my award was $400,000. So my sense of justice and the legal system is what I really struggle with, because I'm a law and order type of person. And my husband never got to see the outcome.
No, that's got to be the hardest part.
Yeah. So crazy long story as short as possible. But
and we're so sorry for you.
Yeah, you can Google Richard Paxton and Pacific University, and there's all sorts of things about it. And yeah, so.
Well, Betsy, maybe we can get some of those links in the chat so people don't have to, if you can Google around in the background there.
You want a link to Mr. Paxton? Is that what you're saying? Sure.
Yeah.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah, or Kelly, if you have it and want to do it. All right, Madeline. So I know Madeline. I don't know Madeline. I only know Madeline because her husband brags about her so much. And I've read about her in this book, Accused of Treason, which is the Dave Tenenbaum story. But tonight, we're going to talk about the Madeline Tenenbaum story.
Okay, so I guess Jackie had asked us to say a few words about ourselves first. So at the time that this all happened, it was 97. I was a stay-at-home mom with a 4-year-old and an 18-month-old. And I was a full-time mom at that point. I am professionally a massage therapist and a clinical therapist, social work therapist. At the time, I mean, a lot of this is in the book. So do you want me to tell my story or?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
We can put the book in the
okay.
too.
Yeah, it might as well, because there's a lot. Obviously, I'm not covering a lot of it, but it was a very traumatic situation, the incident itself. Now, the whistleblowing, it's like there's different parts of the situation of the, so the whistleblowing was just my husband's domain. He had designed armor for tank and armor survivability, which would have prevented a lot of soldiers from dying who did die in Afghanistan and Iraq. So that was just like horrible. And he was calling out people on that from not letting those programs go. But how it affected me personally and our family was, it was, as it was alluded to, we're religious Jews, and that says it in the book also. So one day a week is our Sabbath. It's a holy day. We don't use any electricity or whatever. Anyway, we had friends over on our Sabbath. We were eating Sabbath lunch, and there was a knock on the door, I think, or a pounding on the door, and it's at 12 o'clock noon, and it was the FBI that came to raid our house. There was no warning. It was just a total crazy shock. And we have a close friend who's a lawyer that lives literally down the block. And I said, excuse me, I'll be right back. And they said, you can't leave. And I said, I'll be right back. And I went past them and I walked it's like a half a block down. And I said, but he had already seen all these cars come and he had a sense of what was happening. And he came and he was there and he had called, I don't know, we had a criminal, whatever it was. So, okay, that was on a Shabbos, on a Saturday. 2 days later, I was going out. David was at work. I was going out on a walk with my kids, and I see down the block, like ABC or one of the huge news stations with cameras and like reporters. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think they're coming for us. And I turned back around and we basically hid out in my house. Oh no, actually I turned around and I went away from my house, past my house to a friend's house. And after nightfall, she drove us home. And I literally crawled on the floor to shut the shades. And that was very traumatic. And our daughter for years was very traumatized by that. Like any knock on the door was a big deal. Anyway, so that's, I don't know if I got off tangent or whatever, but that's kind of a background of us.
No, you just said so many perfect things we're going to put a pin in and come back to, but I've had so many other whistleblowers and the families who talk about that knock on the door and being frightened of the knock on the door or when the phone rings. And like I said earlier, I've talked to so many adult children who have that moment of fear. Matthew, we'll get to questions once we've kind of done a round with everybody. I want to let our panelists who have given us their time tonight, and then we'll come back to some of the Q&A. But Karen, go ahead and introduce yourselves.
Okay, great. Again, thank you for having me here. Karen Carson, my husband Joe has been a whistleblower. It first started in like 1992. My background is we moved to Knoxville, Tennessee in 1990. We have 3 children who are now grown. And I am a nurse. I've always been a pediatric critical care nurse. So I worked in my field, and my engineer husband, who thinks and processes things entirely differently than I do, started working for the Department of Energy when we moved here in Knoxville. His whole case started so simply. And, you know, as I learn stories, I find that that is often the case. In 1992, as a professional engineer, he was working as a safety engineer at the site. And, you know, computers had just recently been out, and keyboarding and things like that, all skills that he didn't have. And he just found it very frustrating that he was spending probably 60% of his time trying to type reports. And he just is like, this doesn't make sense. You're paying me so much. So he requested secretarial support to type his reports, and that was denied. He then invested a whole lot of time in learning keyboarding, which obviously I think has served him well. He writes a whole lot now, so I don't know if it did or not. But as they spent time in the field and realized that they were spending time writing their reports, 2 of the engineers that worked in their group resigned and then were hired back as consultants for basically the same job, except that their job then was to type all the reports. And Joe raised questions about that being wasteful. And that was denied, and he was told to just basically stay in his lane. And then he raised some concerns about some safety findings that he had that were ignored. And when he questioned those and brought that out to his chain of command and got nowhere with it, he filed a complaint. And the very next performance appraisal period, he went from a 4.2, I think, on a 5-point scale to a 0.8 in his performance. He was put on a performance improvement plan, and obviously at that point he started fighting the whole process and finding it really difficult to do so. He is a submariner from the Navy, so he believes in chain of command and in process and in the rules, and couldn't get anywhere. He became known around there as kind of a troublemaker because he questioned things. And then ultimately, we had probably 2 to 3 years later, he was given a mandatory relocation to DC. No one else in his group was, but it was important for his job that he be relocated. And that's when we filed the whistleblower retaliation suit, which we did eventually get to a hearing and did win. But that was, at that point, we had 3 children, like an 18-month-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. And from that point on, you know, what we've learned is you can win a hearing, but winning just means that they rescind what they did. You know, that's all they have to do. And the retaliation double down, and it gets covered up and hidden. And over the years, you know, why are we as a family in this so long? Why is Joe continuing his battle? And it's because as he looked to the places that have been put in place to protect whistleblowers and to maintain an environment where people feel free to raise safety concerns, they don't work. So the Merit System Protection Board and the Office of Special Counsel aren't doing the jobs that they've been put in place to do. I don't want to go into any more detail because it just goes on and on and on. And I think everybody who knows a little bit about whistleblowing knows the way it works.
So first of all, two things strike me as you guys have introduced yourselves. One is that you all have your own background in service to others, whether, I mean, Kelly mentioned law enforcement, Karen mentioned education, or no, nursing, and Madeline mentioned social workers. So I think that's an interesting aspect of this. And you're all pretty knowledgeable about your husband's cases and what went on. But I want to pivot a little bit. And Madeline, I'm going to read this from Dave's book. Because there's a line in here that has just really stayed with me. And then I'm going to ask you guys to comment. So Dave writes, his marriage was on edge. The love was there, but his stress and Madeline's was creating two lonely spouses instead of a team. And that has always, to me, has been the crux for a lot of whistleblowers, because we know there are a lot of divorced whistleblowers. So how do you take, two people who are dealing with something separately and create that team? I mean, what made you enjoin on this journey as opposed to say, don't tell me, I don't want to know, because we've seen plenty of spouses that have moved out or have said, I want my life back, and they don't want to be raided by the FBI. So I'm going to start with Kelly, and Madeline, I know you know the quote, so I'm going to start with Kelly, and we'll work our way back.
It was easy for us to be a team because there was evidence, and I am an investigator, and I was like, this is easily provable. And so, however, I think, and I know of a different case, had we not had I'm not going to say we had the greatest marriage ever, but like, had we not had a strong marriage, I could have seen a lot of finger pointing and things like that. But then, 4 months into this, my husband got cancer, and he kept at it for a while, but then at a certain point, because the lawyer was actually my friend at the time, he's like, I'm done. You can do what you want with it, but I can't do it, because he knew he was going to die.
Hmm.
So we focused on that.
Do you think his cancer had anything to do with the stress from all of this?
His mom died of pancreatic cancer 27 years before, but they say it's not genetic. Do I think it exacerbated it? Potentially.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way to prove it, but
right.
It couldn't help.
No. All right, Karen, what makes you a team?
Again, when it's gone on for 33 years, it varies throughout the time period. I think ultimately we both were firm in our commitment that we made when we took our vows of marriage. And so, there are many, many things that we could have gone through. In my experience as a critical care nurse, I see families go through just horrendous things. None of it's fair. And it breaks up a lot of families. So what we have gone through, I think, has been horrible. But no more so than other trials that are put in front of people. I think we really relied on the fact that we were committed to our marriage and to our family and to our kids. When you have 3 young kids. Now there were points in order to survive, in order for our family, because one thing about whistleblowing, it becomes all consuming. It takes over everything. And it has to, because you're fighting a system that is so huge. And I, at some point, realized, probably 4 to 5 years into it, and had to sit down with Joe and say, I have to set some boundaries, because our family can't survive, and our family certainly can't thrive if we're both fully consumed by this. And so there certainly were parameters, and you know, he may send me 50 emails a week on more 20 and 30 page papers to read, and I'm not going to read them. I certainly gave it times that we talked, and when it impacted things that we had to do, usually time, you know, he was going to be in his cave fighting another legal battle for the next week until a deadline. We backed out, and you know, I took on many more responsibilities in the family, but there had to be some boundaries, because we couldn't both be 100%.
Right. No, that makes perfect sense, that you had to divide up the labor so that one person could take care of the family and keep things together and keep a family functional, because again, that I think is so hard. I think that's why I like the quote so much, is because what takes two isolated people and help them be a team, when it's just as easy to say, okay, I have my boundaries, and for those boundaries to cause more and more of a division, instead of going, okay, we have boundaries, but where I'm going to do these tasks while you do those tasks. So, Madeline, how did that work in your family?
Jackie, when you were reading that quote, I was like, oh, right, that quote. I've just been through a lot of ups and downs and feelings, and I can relate a lot to a lot of things that Karen said. I mean, I went through stages of feeling so angry at him for getting himself into this, so to speak, and why even do this? And it took up so much time. And I mean, you're a better woman than I. Like, I won't even read. Like, I just kept it to a minute. I had to make boundaries, because just for me to, like, at that point we were having a third and a fourth kid, and I was always working very, very part-time at that, like very part-time. But I just needed to keep my sanity. But where it affected us was, like, I'd go on vacations by myself with the kids, like to my parents, not like to Europe or anything. But just like that sense of commitment, you know, we also, we made our vows. We are committed to each other, committed to marriage. I certainly always felt love for him. I mean, things were a little bit enraging in certain ways, and he was home all the time for a few years. And, you know, it was just like that was very difficult. But I saw the bigger picture, and I tried to keep my focus on the bigger picture. So, and also the threat of him going to prison, which our lawyer had told him in the beginning, sort of was like, you know what? It kind of put things into perspective. Or actually, the threat of the punishment for treason is either life in prison or execution. So it was like the stakes were pretty high. So I decided to be all in.
Nope. No, I mean, I think that's a good perspective. And I think, Karen, you said that about, you know, you go from taking care of critical care patients, law enforcement, you see the real bad things in the world. It must help sort of balance out this other stuff. It must make it a little more manageable. What about the kids? You both mentioned your children. Where were they when, I mean, all this was happening? Your kids saw the house get raided by the FBI. Your kids have seen dad in the cave. What has that meant to them? And do you talk about it as a family?
I think the memories of my daughter, who was 4, maybe 4.5, were pretty pushed down. I mean, she does remember feeling very afraid when strangers came to the door. I don't think she remembers the cause of that. I don't think she remembers the raid. My son does not remember the raid, but right after the raid, what happened was my husband was hiding out at a friend's, and we had FBI cars following me, doing carpool, doing whatever, the groceries, taking the kids to the babysitter. And he would say, he was very observant, and he loved cars like any little boy. He's 18 months, and he would say, "Ka, ka." And we didn't know what he was saying. And then we figured out he was saying car. Like he would see the FBI cars. And then once my husband like got out of the hiding and that the news sort of left us left us, whatever, we weren't so interesting to them anymore. The FBI cars were with us for, I think, about 6 months, following us. Yeah, like 24/7. So yeah, so my kids, so the two younger ones like have no relation, and the two older ones, I mean, I would have to think there's some like cellular memory there, but they really, what my daughter really remembers more is like the fear of strangers coming to the house.
So they don't really talk about that anymore. And I know you've got adult children, so they're kind of off doing their own thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. But there was, I mean, children, like any human being, senses, especially children, when another person is in anxiety or fear. So, I mean, when I was shutting the shades, literally crawling on the floor, we had those windows where it was like low. It was very scary. I was terrified. I mean, it wasn't like there were robbers outside, but like there were just cameras, and my husband was not home. It was very, very scary, and I'm sure they picked up on that. But at the time of the raid, like our friends, the woman was like reading to her children and my children, and she was distracting everybody.
Oh, nice
So
to have that kind of support system too.
yeah, exactly.
So my kids really don't want to talk about it at all. It became consuming for me, especially because my husband passed. And my daughter, probably around 16, said she wanted to be a lawyer. And that's completely gone out. My son has really struggled since losing my husband, but a huge part of it is the lack of justice.
Yeah, that they don't get to see that. You know, it's the world is not fair, and it's hard to learn that as a young person when you want the world to be fair, and your parents are your heroes.
Yeah, I think my kids, they're all grown and out on their own now, and Joe and I are both very grateful. We still have a great relationship with all of them. I think they, like me, everybody approaches challenges in life differently. And it was very clear to me at some point in this battle, and Joe and I had many discussions about it, I would have walked. I would have said, I believe in doing my civic duty, and I believe in trying to make the world better, and I believe in trying to fix things that are wrong. But at some point, family has to come in and other things that you could potentially be doing that are good in life. And so there's no doubt in my mind that I would have at some point in that battle said, bye, see you. I'm not going to fight this. My kids, I think, all would hold the same thing. I think they've got a good understanding of justice. They have a good understanding, as I do, of the courage it takes to be a whistleblower. Mm-hmm. They and I respect Joe tremendously for the battle he has fought. They understand, I believe, that for him it really has become a mission, a calling, something that he feels like he's been given the abilities to fight, so he's therefore going to fight it. But I think they, like me, would not choose to do the same in their own families. We've got finally a 1.5 and 3-year-old grandchildren from our oldest son and daughter-in-law. and I watch him parent. And, I think that he tries to be very aware of how important family is. And that's kind of the culture of that generation anyway, is they do have some clear work-life balance boundaries. And so I appreciate seeing that in them. But I think, we didn't have to experience the threats, the physical threats and the terror that you all describe. But the threat of always wondering, is Dad going to get fired? Is he going to get, or is he going to lose this next battle? Is it going to push him over the edge? Always existed, I think, for all of them. But I think that they have in their, they clearly have not gone into public service in their works and their professions, and have chosen differently.
Yeah, that's certainly a tell, right?
Yeah.
So I know I promised people that as we came to the half-hour mark, we'd open up for questions. I don't know if Matt is still on, but I saw you had a question early on. If you're still here and want to ask your question or put it in the chat.
He left the meeting.
Oh, he did. Okay. All right. Anybody else have any thoughts they want to share? I know we have some new people on here tonight.
Everyone's muted, Jackie, so if somebody wants to ask a question, they can just put their hand up and I'll unmute them.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go. I think I saw Rob first.
I'm working on it.
Let me see.
Okay.
It looks like the mic came on. I
Yep.
mean, the video's not on. The video's not on, but the mic's on. But that's fine. Yeah, I thought those were great points that everyone made. I myself was the whistleblower, and so I have that opposite perspective. But I can add one thing, which is, or maybe two. One of which is, just looking at my wife over the years. I think that another thing is financial stress. We did not have financial stress. That helped a lot. Number one, and she was very oriented and offended by the whole process of what was going on. I, at the same time, didn't see myself as a whistleblower initially. It was kind of, they kind of came after me for more sociopathic, shall we say, reasons that were inappropriate, more fraud, and I was more of a witness. I was a whistleblower, but anyway, so she was equally offended. So I think that helped and made it more stable. The other thing is, because of that, there wasn't like that pressure to work. So she actually benefited. So she thought it was great. Instead of having another, she said, we don't need any more clinical incomes. We already have a lot of money and we don't need this money. And it's actually was great for her to have someone working from home, doing my own business, and, kind of helping a lot. So it was very helpful to her career. So she really, that's a weird thing to say, but it almost, in that case, benefited the spouse in this unusual set of circumstances. So I'm just pointing out that sometimes you can get odd circumstances but I got to the point, so it's actually the opposite. I got to the point where it was like, okay, and she was encouraging me, do this business where you're helping other people. And we both found it very gratifying. So I had this little consulting firm where we've helped lots of people over the years, individually, one by one, with their whistleblowing cases. And it was very gratifying. And so we liked that. And she was sort of advisor to them. But it got to the point where, I really wanted to do one of the things whistleblowing does is, of course, cripple your career, your ability to go on with another career.
Right.
And so I decided, well, I would like to get back into something medical, and I want to be a psychiatrist. So then let me just be a psychiatrist. And she spent quite a bit of effort trying to sway me from doing that. So again, this is one of those unusual cases where there's probably a kind of a secondary game where she was benefiting from the spouse, being the support spouse because of the whistleblowing case, if you can imagine something strange like that. So I just point out that it's an unusual probably story compared to the mainstream, but weird things like that can happen. So yeah, that was.
No, I definitely appreciate your sharing that, because I think we have to, you know, this part of this peeling back the onion is to see, you know, what helps families survive, not just the negative. And I'm going to go to Bali next, and then Brian, I see you've put a question in the chat. So go ahead, Bali.
Yes, I just had a question for all three of the panelists. I was curious what role your religious or moral value system, or maybe religious or communities that you belong to, what role that played in helping you get through this terrible experience, and also maybe helping you understand why your spouse was so committed to doing the right thing despite, you know, kind of the fallout, you know, because we have an imperfect society with an imperfect justice system. So I was just curious about that with all three of you.
No, great question.
Can I go first?
Sure.
It's so funny. I literally was just writing down my society, the religious society that I live in. And I was telling my husband, well, first of all, everyone was so supportive and really like just saved us really on so many levels, emotionally, psychologically, financially helping. If it weren't for the fact that it broke into the press was a horrible embarrassment for my husband, but that made everyone know about it. And everyone rose up to the occasion and was an incredible support. So that's a very, very valid point. And then of course our basic belief system, like everything happens for a reason. And that just also really helped me ride it and get through it. And like, what am I learning right now? What am I learning from this right now? Why could this be happening? So yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, I would also say, I think our spiritual beliefs are just our whole basis of who we are and what our beliefs and our values as a couple helped us through this. I will say, I think, you know, when a lot of the people that we are involved in at the church are also in the same professions as Joe was. There's always a bit of a standoffish kind of, I don't want to get involved in the nitty gritty, because they certainly don't want to be immersed in it too. I found it more solitary. I think as the years went on, it got so complex that it's hard for people to understand. And once that happens, it wasn't something that you can come together. You know, I think there always were people, I think sometimes there were just more people who would look at me and say, why do you do it? Because it did consume Joe so much at different times. But I also think that we knew that, again, if you've been given the gifts and the ability and the resources, even if it becomes tight financially, to fight something, you know, to him much is given, much is expected. And we felt that calling.
So in my husband's case, a huge part of it was they attacked his character. And that was the thing. For them to call him an anti-Semite was gutting to him. And so incredibly wrong. The students, 5 students complained, and that's what started this whole entire thing. And he was never allowed back on campus or anything like that. So there was no question I was going to fight for his character after he passed, especially. Like, there was just absolutely no question. Things were taken out of context. I have a huge belief in fairness and justice. I do think that there is a silver lining. It has taken, 4+ years, and things are happening at the university. And there was a lot of whispering, like, well, maybe he did do it. And now they're seeing what is happening, and they're like, now they're scared, because it's kind of like they could be thrown in the barrel just as easily as he was.
Mhm.
And so it's taken them this long to realize, with budget cuts and everything like this, like, hey, maybe Paxton was right. Like,
Yeah, maybe he's immune.
yeah. And so they just, so, but I have, Erin said the guilt. I have guilt that bad things could happen to the university, but there's other people who said why. They're the ones who did it. But I still have guilt because it was a lovely place for him for 15 years. Lovely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard some whistleblowers say that too, that's the catch-22. You're going to report somebody who maybe you like too. I mean, I know, one of the whistleblowers that I've talked to, he really liked the guy who he discovered was committing fraud. And he knew that by reporting him, the guy was going to go to jail and his family was going to suffer the consequences. But, he had to make his decision to do the right thing. And I think I see Brian put in the chat, and I think it pivots to what Kelly was just saying. Was the label whistleblower problematic for you and your family? Was it like a stigma? Does it follow you due to the internet searches, always connecting your name or your spouse's name to the issue?
Well,
do you feel followed?
In my husband's case, the whistleblower claim got thrown out. But Jackie and I talked about this, and it's like, but he is the only one, I'm going to say, who stood up to them. Everyone else like quietly disappeared and signed an agreement. So wasn't technically by law a whistleblower, but he is the only person who stood up.
Well, and we define whistleblowing as the act of making a disclosure with the potential for retaliation. So, I mean, I think that covers a lot of people. And to me, it doesn't matter what system your case is going to, whistleblowing still has these common elements to them.
And I do think that there is a stigma associated with it. I don't feel like our family suffers from it. But, do I know that there are people, always that are like, he's a whistleblower, because a lot of people put whistleblower synonymous with disgruntled employee. And it is so very different. But what I have witnessed in being in a long-term situation is, if you were to see my husband when we first started these proceedings versus 30 years later, and you only met him 30 years later, you see somebody who can be bitter at times and very pointed in his arguments and things like that. That's because of what he's learned through the years. That's the trauma of whistleblowing and the changes in a personality and in an outlook. And I'm very grateful that he still has the ability to be loving and relax a little and have some fun. But there's no doubt in my mind it's very different than what it could have been. But again, there are so many things in life that can change your life. We don't get to choose those. We choose how we respond to them. And but there's certainly, it's frightening to me, the ignorance that the general public has about whistleblowers. And I think what's most frightening to me is to know how chilling that can be on our safety, because there's no doubt in my mind that there are many, many people who worked with Joe who will privately very much say he recently retired and, be very positive to him about what they admired about him and things like that. But I think they all learned, look, if somebody asks me, I'm going to look the other way because the costs are huge.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a fair enough point. And that's another reason why we created this community, because we need to rebuild that sense for whistleblowers that they still fit in somewhere. And Karen, trust me, we get those, and Madeline, we get those very long emails that I have to figure out, what am I reading? Where does it start? Where does it end? And I go through these things. But I think it's because we understand each other and we understand that lived experience that I think building what we're building here has been so important. Rob, I don't know if your hand is still up from before. I think Bali raised her hand again.
Yeah, it never went down. I don't.
Oh, okay. Well, then
you know what? It now worked. I got it down.
Okay, there you go. Bali, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to say that while everybody was talking, what was going through my mind was the quote of Martin Luther King Jr., and he was paraphrasing the abolitionist Theodore Parker. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Because I think that like every time one person speaks out against an injustice, that makes it a little bit safer for the other people, you know, and a lot of people have suffered tremendously themselves for trying to fight for justice, but like eventually the society benefited. And so, you know, that's one of the things I think is you have to hold on to as a whistleblower is, you know, if you hadn't spoken out, whatever that was that you were trying to point out would have just gone on and on and on, you know, and maybe it'll be a little bit easier for the next person because now there's a record, like what Kelly Paxton, what you said, right? You know, the university is not going to be so easily able to get away with this the next time because now there's a record of this happening in the past. So just my 2 cents.
No, that's lovely point and lovely quote. And I think I saw Erin from Canada said that she was a whistleblower regarding contamination sites in the National Defense in Canada, a veteran and public servant that has been to the House of Commons regarding this newly evolving situation. Husband Jay is with her. We don't get a lot of husbands that have joined these conversations, but we know that a little more than half of whistleblowers do tend to be women. It's about equal, but you know, when we did our survey last month, we saw a few more whistleblowers than non-whistleblowers that were women. Well, Erin, why don't you jump in, and I don't have to read your quotes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just gonna say, when you say you don't get a lot of husbands, there's not a lot of husbands like mine. He is amazing. And he's been my person through all of this. It's been about 1.5 years since I got started. So thank you for sharing your stories. Because like to me, this is like something I didn't know anyone else went through. I have Parkinson's disease. And women my age don't get that, but I worked in an aircraft hangar that I found out has been contaminated for all 13 years, including one of my pregnancies. I have a visual impairment due to my Parkinson's. And I started asking questions based on the fact all the women had died in my areas other than myself, and 2 of them, and we had so many people with breast cancer. I know now, talking after my diagnosis, it is caused by long-term exposure, and I'm only in my early 40s, but that's reality. But I wonder like how you guys find balance, because so I was a clerk. I deal with policy and contracting. So what I did was I went through, no one knew what I was working on for 6 months because I wanted to prove that I was wrong. So between ATIPs and policy investigation, I ripped apart the contamination site program, with National Defense. I've been told by a lawyer and some other people in high government that this is probably going to be one of the biggest scandals to hit, but I'm terrified. I kind of like can't not say something because they've affected my children's well-being. If my Parkinson's progresses, and I'm so young still. But like, how do you keep moving when you're just so tired and guilty because you can't be enough for anyone because you're trying to protect other people?
Well, I think you have to prioritize your health over everything else. And then I think like we were just talking about, it's about building community that helps and supports you. Erin, I do a lot of veterans work in the US. I don't necessarily know the veterans world in Canada as well, but I do know some. And I think Pamela Forward is on from Whistleblowing Canada. We just need to build you your community. You're in this early and there's a lot going on, and we need you to, one, tell your story, and then let's find a way to get you more help and support.
Pamela's the one that sent me this information. Yeah. I'm from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. I'm from like the middle of like nowhere. And the fact that I found this was just, I don't know. I don't know why I was the one that, I think it must have been discovered before. It's just no one had discussed it in public.
Yeah, that's often very much the case. Okay, well, good. And I'm putting my email in the chat too. So you can email me. And like I said, I know that there is a VA system in Canada. I don't know it as well as our own, but I also know a couple of attorneys who might have some ideas. So again, this is all about building community. I know we're getting to the top of the hour. Lovely Heart, I see a hand is up.
Hi, this is Latise. It used
Oh, okay.
I don't know why it logged into that, but this is Latise, and I want to thank you all so much for this community and for sharing your stories. You know, I'm a whistleblower for a major airline. Thankfully, I'm still employed, but they're doing everything in their power to get me out, and they're targeting me. So it's important to have these discussions because it's just been so encouraging to hear. Oh my goodness, like FBI raid. I thought that I thought I was the top of what was going on. I'm like, oh my goodness, people really go through some things. Just to hear all of your stories is very encouraging to know that whistleblowers were not alone in this fight and advocacy for our rights and the right to be safe, the right to just do the right thing. And my heart goes out to everyone who has shared their stories. But I feel that this is a great community to just gather insight. So my company, I voiced safety concerns and that they were in violation of Air 21 and Affordable Health Care Act statutes. And I faced so much retaliation, and they used personal things against me. My minor daughter is a victim and witness in multiple human trafficking, child exploitation cases for Airline to team and share that they fight human trafficking and child exploitation, and then to use that against one of their employees who's facing that, where I at home had to protect my family, and what work was my safe place and to go to work, and they prey on me as a predator, tracking me. So I wonder with you how you all went through those who went through the legal system. Did you have attorneys? How did you get through that process? Do you have any tips on how to, when you're facing large corporations that have billions of dollars and all these attorneys, how do you get through that?
So Jackie knows this, and anyone who listens to my podcast knows this. I despise lawyers, so I apologize if there are any lawyers on the thing. The system is broken. If I didn't have, I'm not wealthy by any stretch. If I didn't have the means I had, I would have gone away. In my case, I would have gone away. It's ruined relationships. People know I hate lawyers. My worst fear is that eventually I will fall in love again and it will be a lawyer and I will have to leave. My daughter, not going to be a lawyer. My kid, the legal system is so slow. And that's what's so frustrating. And you're at the mercy of people who I'm going to say the lawyers end up making it about themselves and not their clients on either side. And they forget they have a client. Soapbox over.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, I would say this, that unfortunately, if you're going to go to court, you need a lawyer. Joe's tried many times to go on his own, and they won't even listen to you. So just be prepared for a lot of money. If you win, you get back some of that money. You don't get back the amount of time that goes into it, but it's a necessary evil. I think one of the things that we've identified over time, though, is the legal system is broken. If you go to the Office of Special Counsel, you go to MSPB, and you go to court, the lawyers for those two organizations that were set in place to protect whistleblowers and to make sure that whistleblowers had the freedom and the right to voice concerns, their legal ethics demand that they defend their client, who is OSC and MSPB. You know, it's like you have a lawyer in a criminal case, and they're going to defend their client. They're not going to ask them if they did wrong or not. Their job is to defend their client. Well, the same thing exists in our legal system for these organizations. So it's a mess.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I started by saying bureaucracies are not people, and they don't care about the people on the other end of their bureaucracies. I know Pamela Forward has her hand up, and I don't know, Rob, if you're trying to comment again. We've got like 3 minutes left. So, Pamela, can you unmute? Oh, here she comes.
Yeah. Hi. So I'm going to try and talk fast then, which is going to be hard, but the comments about lawyers particularly resonated with me. In Canada, we have a very different situation. There are no laws in Canada that protect whistleblowers at all. The ones that we do have federally and provincially protect supposedly only public servants. They protect them, but studies have shown these laws have no best practices, don't work, don't protect anybody but the officials who created the laws. So what we just did was we did a survey of lawyers in Ontario, which is the biggest province in the country. And we did it because we get calls from all across Canada. We are the only organization in a country of 40 million people that is looking at whistleblowing in a comprehensive way. And so with this survey, few responded. We wanted to find out because whistleblowers said no lawyers would take their cases. Okay, we knew why, but we wanted to know from them. And we did a report. Anyway, they're aware of the cultures. They don't understand why they're happening the way they're happening. And as a result, we identified 40 of the 5,000 that we emailed who are willing to consider whistleblower cases. And some of them, and we put it on our website, some of them will do so pro bono. But the other thing they told us was that they need education. They want to know more about the laws, why we have them, why you don't have them, and why people are treated so abominably. So we are hoping now, we have applied for more funding. We got our funding to do the survey from the Law Foundation of Ontario. So Kelly, I hope that gives you some hope that the lawyers, the organization, that regulates lawyers, and the foundation that works with the interest from the legal trust money, they fund, nonprofits in the community. They put the money back to help people access justice. They have recognized our work and the need, And we believe, and fingers crossed, that we will get the money to provide that education. And we'll, I can tell you for sure, we're going to be asking Jackie to star in our courses, because a lot of this is just not understanding, you know, the depth of dehumanization and devastation that we do to humans, to ourselves, to our friends. We turn on each other in order to what? Protect reputations, protect the status quo. Anyway, we all know. Thank you. Sorry.
No, thank you. And I think the fact that, you know, we're working across borders and collaborating, I think is important. We have to build a global community that is addressing this issue, because I think once we show that these are human responses, that no matter what country you live in, this is kind of where we're at. Rob, I see you have a question. Is it quick, or do you want to put it in the chat?
Yeah, no, I was just going to make a comment about the legal system being a major part of the whistleblowing problem, and it goes beyond that. But you know what? We'll have many other opportunities in the future, and I see that it's 8:01. So no, it's not. It's too much to write up, and we'll come back to it, I'm sure.
Okay, yeah, we definitely will have conversations.
Right.
During our conference in September, our first panel is usually the lawyers. We bring them in and we get them to talk about their cases and why they do what they do. So it's always good to have them kick off the conference and give us their perspective. I definitely appreciate so much Kelly, Karen, Madeline. This was really, truly wonderful to get to know all of you and everybody who's joined in tonight. This is a family issue. Retaliation is trauma, and it goes beyond just the workplace. So thank you. We will have this up on our YouTube channel for everybody who either wants to watch it again or share it with your friends and family. And we will follow up. Our next roundtable should be April 22nd. And I think we were going to talk more about the faith-based community, but I have to double check and see if we have our cadre of speakers. So thank you again, and I'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Jackie.
you.